Hello and welcome everyone to the Weird World of Knowing. We are back this week with, frankly, quite a scary guest. Oh, it's so scary. He's disappeared. Now, Caelan's energy is so potent, everybody, that he has literally disappeared off the screen, and he's going to pop back very, very shortly. So I'm just going to press pause and wait for him. And I'm giggling because we've just started to do the podcast, and as I was about to introduce him, he disappeared off the screen because his energy is so potent, everybody, that this is what happens to electronics. So welcome, Caelan Rain. How are you?
Pretty good. Our almost 3 feet of snow is gradually melting here in Maine. I think we're down to a foot now.
Oh gosh, yes, of course you've got snow over there. We've had a beautiful spring day, and I've just been out in our community garden with the volunteers. So yeah, we've got a little bit of sunshine in the UK, which for us is a real delight, I must say.
Our gardening is probably still 2 or 3 months away.
Oh yeah, no, it's an absolute delight to get back into it, I must say. So everyone, let me introduce Caelan. Caelan is a monk, has been studying Buddhism for the past 50 years, and is an expert in acoustic archaeology, which I am really interested to find out more about, Caelan, really am. Shamanism, and he has a website called themonklibrary.com, which I suggest every single one of you go and check out because there is so much information in there. It is not only going to blow your mind, but educate you in the most wonderful of ways. So, Caelan, hello and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
It should be interesting given that you've been at 2 science and consciousness conferences.
Well, it's taken me this long to pluck up the courage to interview you, so here we are. Okay, so Caelan, because of your extensive knowledge and information, you're now crossing the realms of ancient wisdom with science and the science world. How is that working out for you?
The term out of Tibetan Buddhism is called a terton, a Terton, and that's a person who's come forth to reveal previously held secrets. So part of my training was in the Himalayas with the first religion of the planet, which was known as the Nameless Religion.
Mm.
You can look that up in Eliad's work or anywhere, just type in Nameless Religion on the web. And some people call it sort of pre-literate Bon, but it was the first religion on the planet that moved all over. And the two subcategories are sacred conventions and patterns of heaven and earth.
Mm.
So basically what I'm working with are the patterns of heaven and earth. And then the sacred conventions are the methods to work with the patterns of heaven and earth. Because I'm a UU community, Unitarian Universalist community minister, I also have an upbringing in my early days in Pentecostal and Baptist religions and everything. So I have the Bible thing sort of covered from the lower end. But in the Bible, where it says in the beginning was the word, is a mistranslation. One of the papers on the libraries discusses this. The actual translation from Hebrew is by means of beginning was the word. And by means of beginning means that it's something that predates the word. And to me, that's wisdom, because if you also look in the Bible and you look in the discussions of wisdom, wisdom always says, I was there before everything. I was there when God created the world. I was there before this. I was before that. So I think the misinterpretation of in the beginning was the word, something predated that, and that was wisdom. So.
Okay, can you explain to me what you mean by wisdom then?
Wisdom are these patterns of heaven and earth. These are these various patterns that I work with. And primordial wisdom, every tradition goes back to this. Goes back to some sort of indigenous culture. The UK, China, it doesn't matter what country you are or what region of the world you're in, everything eventually finds its way back to indigenous cultures and people that were doing things that modern day science is just catching up with.
Yeah.
The chiropractor I go to has a small device that he uses based on electromagnetic technology where he holds it against you and does a little bump on it I've been doing that with my singing bowl for, like 25 years. In indigenous cultures, they would take a singing bowl or a drum or something and tap it to get that same sound or frequency, and then hold it on someone's body or right near it. And when I sound my singing bowl and someone puts their finger toward it, when they get within about a half inch, they get a buzz.
Hmm.
They have to pull their finger back because it's almost like a shock. So science is just finding that out. On the class to the caves this summer in Chartres on the acoustic archaeology, it'll be an explanation of how people went into the caves. They would draw the animals on the wall, and then they would communicate through the energy lines to the people who were out in the field and direct them to where the animal was so that they could hunt it down. And I had a discussion with someone in neuroscience recently and talking about artificial intelligence. And he said that some of the military people are hooking up their commanders to some kind of device that they're looking on the multiple screens of everything on the battlefield. And then they decide what they want to do. And then they type in, this is what I would like to see happen. And immediately an artificial intelligence application figures out what that strategy is and sends it out to the people in the field. So this is just an updated version of something people were doing tens of thousands of years ago. There's a lot of talk about quantum. That's like, for the last number of years, I have all these people that are going, and if you look at quantum stuff, and so I refer them back to a paper that I wrote in 1993 when I was in graduate school in Europa called Reality from a Buddhist Quantum Perspective. And that was 30 years ago. I wrote that paper, and I'd already been studying it for 15 or 20 years before that.
Oh, fantastic.
So when people are coming up with quantum at me now, I'm going, yeah, but that's 30 years old, 30 years ago for me. That's why I keep coming up with stranger things, because the quantum stuff is it's not
rocking your boat right now.
it's really not a thing anymore. It's so basic. So.
Wow. So everything that everyone is excited about at the moment about the quantum field, because it's giving the majority of people on the planet an explanation of the energetic field that you work in.
Yes.
Field. So the energetic field that you work in now, if quantum is out of date for you, and I know that we were talking before this podcast, and I was saying I was interested in the archaeology, the acoustic archaeology that you're doing, and what does that mean? And I said, does this mean that you're working on the ley lines? And then you said to me that you were working on the next level up from the ley lines. Can you explain what that means?
Well, the patterns of heaven and earth, it's just an alternate dimension on a different frequency. So when I'm making any adjustments I'm doing or any work I'm doing, I'm working on a different frequency than what other people are working on. So when people come to me and say that I'm doing this work in the UK or Ireland or somewhere, and these are all the lines I'm working on and everything, and they want to know what I think, I don't have much of an opinion of that, because that's not what I'm working on. I'm working on this underlying grid, which are the patterns of heaven and earth, because that's the one that sometimes needs a little bit of stability. It needs like earth acupuncture or something. So it's just like when we left Science and Consciousness last time, I worked on this, I think it's Nine Sister. Anyway, there was a circle down, and we went down and worked on a circle that was near a place we were going to put a labyrinth down. So I went back and sort of did an adjustment on my little grid underneath the circle, and went around and tapped every bowl with my singing bowl so that they sounded each other and they were all connected again. Roll right was that particular circle. And then when we got over to the house, the person's young daughter was sitting at the table, just scribbling on something, and it looked like she was trying to write roll right. And Peter looked at it and he said, "It looks like you're trying to write roll right." And in the middle of in my bowl, as I was doing that, I had a rune. I just doused a rune and picked one randomly. And once she got done writing that, she drew a picture of the rune that we had just done like 45 minutes before that over at the stone circle. So obviously at that point, because my idea was I was going to connect that stone circle to their land where I was going to put the labyrinth. So that's where they would be drawing the energy from. So
Okay.
so those are the things.
So let's backtrack a little bit here for the listeners, please. So my understanding of all of this is that you are working on a different dimension in a way than the Earth's linear patterns at the moment, as we know them 3D wise. And as you're tapping into that part of the field and creating a labyrinth, now this is how we met at Broughton Sanctuary, because at Broughton Sanctuary in Skipton, you've created the labyrinths there and opened up these beautiful portals that really help the land feel sublime. And if you ever go to Broughton Sanctuary, for those of who've listened to the other episode, you know how much I love this place because it really does feel sublime. So the labyrinths that you are then creating are opening up this new energy levels into the field. And Peter Merry, who is a colleague of yours and set up the Weird Experience at Broughton. So his daughter then picked up energetically through the field the information that you were working on and drew it. Yeah?
No, it was the daughter of the David, the person whose land we were putting the labyrinth on.
Right, yeah.
It's his daughter. Peter and I just went over there to do the labyrinth. So it was David's daughter.
Wow, fantastic. But that's basically what's happened, which in a way explains completely the Nobel Prize winners from last year for the physics, who have just won the Nobel Prize for proving that one proton across the river from another proton, when moved in a certain direction, the other proton moved completely in the same way, picking up that information. So they're entangled in some way. So science is sort of proving the energetic work that you are already doing.
It's like quantum entanglement, or I call it a twin particle system with zero spin. So you have the twin particles on either side, and one of them is spinning in a Lucas frequency, and one of them is spinning in a Fibonacci frequency. For those, most people are familiar with Fibonacci numbers. The Lucas numbers are a variation of that, which you start with 2 and 1 instead of 0 and 1. So you have 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, 11, 18, 29. So the field I work in is based on basically are what called the rain numbers at this point, because I figured out long ago how to alternate Fibonacci and Lucas numbers, and it comes up with a completely new set of numbers. And as you move through those numbers, you reach 110, and 110 hertz is the frequency at all the sacred sites. That's been discussed at Science and Consciousness. Brenda Dunn, they were the ones, the Princeton people were the ones that figured that out, that the 110 hertz was in all of the sacred sites. So that wasn't news to me, because that's always been a known fact. But when you alternate Fibonacci and Lucas numbers, in the middle there are this rain frequency. And the next step up from that is the 466 hertz, which it reaches, and then it reaches 555. So 555 is your fifth dimensional portal that comes off of those blended numbers. And 466 hertz was the one that's what I presented last year. I think that was the vibration of consciousness 2 years ago. No, the first conference was the vibration of consciousness is 466 hertz. So this, where the things are speaking with each other on quantum entanglement, that's what I call a twin particle system with zero spin. There are two particles that are actually basically one, and where they come together is in this middle frequency.
Wow. Okay. So that's I'm catching up with that slowly, because I'm not a physicist and I'm not very good with geometry. So most of this I'm catching up with very, very slowly, and I'm sure that a lot of the people who are watching.
But I'm glad they won a Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah, no, they've won this Nobel Prize for it, and that sort of gives us an explanation from a quantum physics sort of view, but you're working at a much deeper level than this. So can you explain to me about the acoustic archaeology and the work that you're doing now at Dordogne?
Doing now where?
In France. You're going to be doing some acoustic.
We're going to Chartres, like we've been going to Chartres for 16, 17 years with Ubiquity. And then we always have a post pilgrimage. And the last time we went to the caves was 10 or 11 years ago.
Can you
So
just explain to the people what the caves are and what's in there?
the caves inside the Lascaux, there's just the caves in the Dordogne region of southern France. It's just all the caves dating back tens of thousands of years that were discovered. Lascaux, I think, might have been the first one discovered, but there are a number of these, and that's where all of the cave drawings of the animals and people, and there's just there are a number of these caves. And we have someone, Pascal is a local person who knows all of the caves, can get entrance to all the caves, even the ones that the public can't get into. And on the tour, we'll be going into all of these caves. And then he'll be discussing those. Appeal will be discussing the indigenous cultures and everything. And then I'll be explaining the acoustic archaeology part. Some of the caves actually have animals, stones that look like animals above them. So that would be an indication of what that cave was used for. And in the cave, some of the stones are actually shaped like animals, as opposed to drawing the animal on the wall. And sometimes they would incorporate the stone and things on the wall in the drawing of the animal. So the part I'm going to be talking about is how they would go into the caves and get in like holotropic states of consciousness and be able to move about freely in another dimension.
By being in those caves. So they're literally
being in the caves and getting into a certain vibration with your meditation in the cave. You can move around. I call it moving around, but you could also telepathically, as I was saying earlier, contact people in the field and direct them where the hunt is.
Fantastic.
On the vibration of the.
Now I want to bring something in here that I watched this week, and gosh, the name's just suddenly gone. Treasures of Arabia. So the Treasures of Arabia, which is on it's Channel 4 iPlayer, whatever it's called, recently has just gone out in the UK, and I'm sure you'll be able to catch it on the Channel 4 player. But basically it is literally going into Jordan, into a lot of these old temples. So you've got Petra and lots of other old temples where they are now giving access to the presenter there, so that she can go in, and the acoustics for these chambers were absolutely remarkable. So I can understand, because I've got that connection of actually how that might sound when you start to play the singing bowls, or you're chanting in that sort of environment with all those beautiful acoustics, much like I would imagine a cathedral or a church. But of course, this is ancient, connecting to, as you say, it could be that either connecting to other realms, or other temples maybe across Jordan, or other temples across France.
Yeah, and when we go in the Chartres Cathedral, that's we have a solo labyrinth walk on Wednesday night where we're the only ones in the cathedral. So I always walk the labyrinth by myself with my bowl and import whatever frequencies are in there to sort of balance everything. But the cathedral, Chartres Cathedral, and most cathedrals are designed as sound chambers, just for the acoustical properties. And there are, if you can get a certain vibration going in the Chartres Cathedral, the stained glass becomes three-dimensional. Sometimes when I've worked with people in the cathedral, they discuss how the stained glass has gone three-dimensional. And last year, we were doing that 5.5 breathing for the first time, and we were down in the lower church. Some people call it the crypt, but it's actually the lower church, because the Black Madonna's down there. And I was sounding the bowl, and we did 5.5 breathing for about 10 minutes. And I told some people ahead of time, I said, at some point there could be a light show, if it hits right, just because of the arc of the lower church, and because it's obviously in the ground and everything, that if you I've never been able to play the singing bowl down there that long. Normally it's just one tap and we're done. But after about 5 or 7 minutes, you could see the light show start with all the arcing and everything. Sort of looks like the Northern Lights. a little bit. So there were people sitting there that didn't have their eyes closed that were watching the light show.
And
So,
was that down below with you, or was that up above in the main area?
no, that was down in the lower church,
Wow.
what is sometimes known as the crypt, but it's really, it's not that tall. When I stand up, the ceilings were only maybe 10 or 12 feet tall.
So
And
would it not be dark in there? Would it not be quite
it was
quite?
dark.
So it's dark, but there was
It
a
was
light.
dark. We don't have very many lights on, a few candles and everything, so it's very dark, but the light show obviously makes it easier to see.
Wow. That sounds really beautiful, actually. I can only imagine what that must have felt like. What did that feel like? Is it like a, I mean,
People found it rather enjoyable. That one person had an issue just because they'd had something with their ears, so it was a balance thing. So they got a bit disoriented just because they hadn't expected that to happen.
Yeah.
But some of the other people seemed okay with it.
What a beautiful experience. Fantastic. Yep. Okay, so let's move on. Now, talk to us about earth shamanism.
Earth shamanism?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a website, earthshamans.com, that Laura and I set up. Laura Esculcas from Portugal was one of my students, and now she's one of the lead teachers at Veriditas, the Labyrinth people. And a few years back, I have a tendency to find really weird websites. So one of my websites is Sacred Landscapes. And I was sitting, I think it was about 20 years ago, and just typed in a domain browser, Sacred Landscapes, because I assumed it wasn't available, and it was. So I got Sacred Landscapes. And so Laura and I were talking about shamanism. And I said, maybe we should just set up earthshamans.com and have some people on that. And she was, it's like, what are the odds of that being available? And I typed in Earth Shamans and it was available. So we have earthshamans.com. And we've just added over the years, we would just add people that interest us, that are doing interesting things around energy or healing work, or just something that intrigues us. We invite them to be on Earth Shamans, and we just list them there. We don't have any classes or anything. It's just sort of a listing service for people that she and I find interesting.
Oh, beautiful. Love it.
So Earth Shamanism is just, people that work, I would just say it's people that work with the earth in whatever way they do. Gardening, you're an Earth Shaman because you garden. Anybody that takes walks in nature I think everybody is actually an Earth Shaman. We're just,
just tapping into it more consciously than perhaps, than some people. Once you start to tap into the earth really quite consciously, beautiful things start to happen.
And it might ask you to do things. If you have a little garden going and everything, you just might sit with the garden.
Well, I can vouch for that because I don't garden, and I kept having dreams that I needed to. So I suddenly set up a community garden, and 5 years later, it's beautiful.
I always work with what I call a genesis point. The first thing we did at Broughton, and I do everywhere, was to determine where the genesis point on the property was. And it ended up being, some people don't know that Broughton goes on both sides of the road. So Broughton actually has another piece on the other side of the road, and the genesis point was in a what's called Hall Close Woods up on the hill. And I went up there and found this little small point. And when I pulled it up on Google, the Google Earth map, Peter has that application where you can see all the lines and everything. When I pulled it up, if you look at that woods across from Broughton Hall on the other side of the road, it is shaped like an Egyptian obelisk. So there's a lot of Egyptian energy at Broughton. So that's what I've been working with this whole time, was this Egyptian energy field. And for a while, various people had theories about where the original hall was. I think that burnt down, and then they built a new one. And so after doing that, we figured out that, well, if it was called Hall Close Woods, it was probably close to the hall.
Ah, yeah, absolutely.
Hall Close Woods.
Yeah.
So figured out that it was likely down under, so I dowsed, and it was underneath there, just on the other side of the road.
Wow.
There's a large field, like a large area there, where likely the original hall was. So once that was done, then that was tied back to where the current labyrinth is. So it's bringing that energy.
So
So
let's talk labyrinths now, because you've mentioned this quite a few times, and having experienced your labyrinths, I know how powerful they are. So you're trained in creating labyrinths. So what is a labyrinth, and how do you use a labyrinth?
to me, it works sort of like the Psychomontium that I built for last fall. It's a means to, I use it as a means for accessing the holotropic states of consciousness. It can be anything. I've done PowerPoints on explaining how memories, when you step into a labyrinth, you have access to every labyrinth that's ever been made and everybody that's ever walked every labyrinth anywhere in the world, because it's its own little connector to all the other labyrinth mythologies, or however you want to describe them. And it's you walk in, you enter, you walk to the center. It's sort of like you go to the center, you rest for a few minutes, you receive something, and then you return. It's like the 3 R's. So you walk to the center, you rest for a little bit and figure out what message you might be receiving, or you've had a question going in, you might be able to, you're looking for an answer to something, you receive whatever information you get in whatever, I don't know, whatever form it is, and then you return with that information.
Mm.
In theory, it should change you because it's a meditation practice.
Mm.
So there's different kinds of labyrinth. There's the Chart labyrinth. Mine is the spiral Ankh. That's the one that's at Broughton. And then there's the classical pattern, which is shaped sort of like the brain. When you look at it at the entrance, it just looks like a brain.
Yeah.
So that's behind, we have 5 acres here. So back in the woods, I have both my labyrinth and the classical labyrinth. I just have 2 on the property here. So the labyrinth is basically a walking meditation device.
How do you decide which one you're going to put down, and how to build it?
Usually I put mine down because it's the simplest one to walk, and it balances the left and right sides of the brain, because you never turn your back on the center. When you walk in, you'll notice when you walk in and you walk to the center, you never turn your back on it. With the Chart pattern, there are multiple times when you're turning your back to it, unless you do the pirouette step. There's a way you can pirouette so you never turn your back on the center. And even with
the significance of not turning your back on it?
I think, just my own theory is that you stay connected to the center that way if you don't turn your back on it. Because if you're walking and all of a, if you're walking and the center can see you and all of a sudden you turn, even for a brief time, to turn a cornering back, the connection's lost. And then it's lost for a certain period of time until you connect it again. In the case of the spiral Ankh pattern that I came up with, you never turn your back on the center. So,
and what is the benefit of the land having a labyrinth?
Of the land having the labyrinth? It just offers a place of meditation. So I just see it as especially for retreat centers. Most of the ones I've done are retreat centers. And some private ones, some people, like the one I just did, the last one I did was just in the UK, and that was on private land, but it's also a Airbnb kind of rental thing. Where they might be able to have events at some point. So I typically am doing them where people are, and it's just way simpler. I can put my pattern down in a day and then have people finish it later. I did one at the Unity Church in Atlanta probably 15 years ago. And I put the pattern down on Friday. They had a call out to the church for people to show up Saturday morning to brick it, and they had a big stack of bricks. And on Saturday morning, I finished the little curves, and they bricked it, and we were done by noon.
Wow!
And they have a huge Facebook group, and just last week they had, the monthly cleanup with a picture of the labyrinth, still going after 15 years.
Beautiful.
They have full moon walks, meditation walks, weekly walks. It's just used all the time. So.
Yeah, it is a really beautiful space to bring people together, isn't it? Because having experienced the ones, because you've done more than one at Broughton, having experienced the ones that you've done at Broughton, and the first experience I had was really the strangest one I had, because I actually felt like I was going down, and And as I was walking into the middle, it was as if my knees were literally being sort of knocked so that I had to drop down. And there was no set pattern as to when that was going to happen. I just thought I was actually losing my balance a little because the ground was a little bit wet. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh, but it kept happening and kept happening. And I thought, I'm going further and further. It was like I was shrinking down into the labyrinth.
Alice in the Looking Glass.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. I thought, I feel like Alice in the Looking Glass going down into this really beautiful portal.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, I'd certainly got an answer, as you say. So it felt very potent.
Yeah, and I have a call with Paris and Roger tomorrow to schedule the April visit, and I'll be putting a classical labyrinth, like the original one from 10, 15,000 years ago, somewhere on the property, and we're going to try to figure out where that's going to be.
Gosh, very exciting.
So then you'll have there'll be another option. Last fall, I put the small one in that the garden, their little meditation garden way back, the pathway that has the pathway through the woods. And so I think we're putting up a stone thing. Roger has some very large stones that he wants put into some configuration. So we got a few little new things that'll be there when people get there after the spring.
Lovely, can't wait. And the painting that you've got behind you, Kaylin, that's one of your paintings, isn't it? Can you explain that to me?
The portal paintings are, there's another one.
Oh. You've disappeared completely now. We can't see you or the painting.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's another one. The portal painting idea is that when you look at them, they have a lot of entities show up, either people or animals or just things that you're not really sure what they are. And I've been doing them for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And it's just a portal into an alternate dimension. And so if I'm doing one for someone, I'll just ask them, give me 5 colors, just the first 5 colors you think of, and that's likely the colors that they want. And then I just send them off a portal painting. I've got little small ones that are 5 by 7 that people carry with them if they're on a board, so they can take them with them to set up altars when they're on the road, all the way up to 20 by 30, 30 by 40. I just, in early December, we went to a biotech company in Seattle that just opened a new warehouse, and I did, I think 12 to hold the energy in specific areas, the laboratory, the offices, the warehouse. So there were a series of 12 paintings that were done to hold the energy field and offer portals. When people are kind of stumped or something, they can stand in front of the painting and just kind of look at it, and it'll focus their thought, and then they'll be able to come up with whatever it was they were trying to come up with.
So how do you create these? What are you tapping into yourself as you create these portal paintings?
I've got probably 150 brushes. So I douse all the brushes and I douse all the paints that I have. It takes longer to do the setup than it does to do the paintings. So I have to douse all of the brushes, all of the paintings, and then use the famous dowsing rod, which is always like an arm reach away, to figure out what frequency the painting needs to be for the person. And then once that's done, just put everything on the painting and then check the frequency. And if it's not quite right, then I can add colors or move something just a little bit to try to get it to the frequency so that it hits the frequency that it wants. Because my theory is that the world, the cosmos or whatever, wants that painting to be a particular frequency. And obviously I'm thinking about the person at the same time. So I'm picking up on whatever they're thinking about and then putting that into the painting.
So what's happening here is we're coming back to the very start of the discussion where you were tapping into the field, these protons either side of the river, so to speak, that entanglement, and you're tapping into all of that, and then you're dowsing with your just your, is that what you use, or do you have a pendulum, or do you use yourself as well?
It's just once I click into that mode, it's just tapping in. It's like when we were at Broughton in October, and we had the two women that were working with the artificial intelligence applications. Remember those?
Mhm.
And the three of us were up, and the one person went into the Psychomontium, and I had never used one before. I had no idea what it was or anything, but one person went into the Psychomontium and was in there, and I was tapped in to figure out what was going on. And the other person showed me the artificial intelligence app, and she said, you can just say anything you want and it will appear here. And I said, like a red individual cloak in a robe coming out of a misty forest, whatever. And it immediately clicked up this image, at which point about a minute later, the person that was in there came out and sat down and said, I can't do this because I've had this entity that's been showing up for a number of months and I can't figure out exactly what it was. And we turned the computer around and said that it looks like this. And she just got up and walked away because that was the image that I was picking up on. That's what she was picking up on.
And it was
So
uncomfortable.
it's those kind of things.
Yeah.
It was,
It was uncomfortable for her.
well, it was just the fact that it happened.
Yeah.
I think some people are okay with that, going, well, that makes sense, you know, that,
Yeah.
but the artificial intelligence picked it up, which is what I'm semi-intrigued that all of a sudden this has become like the huge thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to enable people to actually do some of the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
You know, if they might be able to describe a portal painting and say, can you know, do a painting with these colors? Because I've been typing my haiku in. I've posted a few of them where I just type in my haiku.
What's that?
Haiku is the 17-syllable Japanese poem. My master's degree is in Chinese, or my Master of Fine Arts is in poetry, writing and poetics, with an emphasis on Chinese and Japanese. And so my disquisition was on haiku, and the history of haiku and everything, which part of that was used in the science and consciousness things about the Sitakana and, you know, the one breath and how many syllables are in a breath and all of that. But the haiku are just 17 syllables, and I've been typing them into this artificial intelligence thing, and it comes up with an image.
Wow.
And I think
is that an image that you can relate to after all these years?
It looks just like my haiku. That's what's scary about it, because I've posted them and people are going, where is that, you know, sort of, where did you take that photo? And I'm going like, you know, it's AI.
Wow.
So we're going to put a whole section.
Quite exciting, isn't it? How science is tapping into.
Yeah, so on the Munk Library, we're going to have a new section called Artificial Intelligence Haiku.
Mm.
And we'll just take all my haiku and run them through artificial intelligence, and then take the image and put it up there to see what AI can do.
So tell us now a little bit about the Munk Library and how people can gain access to that.
The Munk Library, because I have a wide range of topics that I can discuss. So if I'm talking to someone, they'll just say, well, I'd like to know more about that, but, you know, we only have 10 minutes because it's short. We have like 90 or 100 people, and I might end up in a 5-minute conversation with someone who's interested in whatever they're interested in, you know, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, or space-time continuums, or whatever they're interested in. And I can talk to them for a few minutes, and they're going, I'd like to know more about that. So about a year ago, I came up with the idea, just take everything I have and put it online for free. So the idea we came up with was the Munk Library, which obviously was available.com, because nobody would think of anything like that. So we put in there all of the papers and the class notes. I'm just right now working through another 275 pages of class notes from Egyptian biogeometry and all these other classes. Sound healing class, and some labyrinth certification classes, a druid geomancy. That's the next load that's going up. And then I just pulled, I used to have a photography exhibit back when there were real cameras, and I had a couple of Leicas. So I just pulled all my Leica slides. So we're going to add another 300 photos. So it made it easier. I could just tell them, well, if you go on the library, there's either a sermon about it, there's a Dharma talk about it, or in the class notes. There's hundreds of pages of class notes. from all these classes I've taken, which
And
you
there
yeah,
is literally, folks, a wealth of information there. And
paintings, poetry, quotes that you can use in different things. I have people that are now going on there and pulling the quotes off and tying them with the photos I have or the paintings I have and making their own things. And we just put it all on there for free. And then at the back end of it, there's a $55 1-year subscription fee for the classes. And right now there are 27 hours of energetics of arts classes, which are all about the energetics and how to dowse art and figure out the frequencies, how to figure out what paints to use, and across about 12 different painting modalities, art modalities, from
wow.
labyrinths and photography, haiku, hierograms, just all these different things. And then
And trust me, everybody, Kaelan over delivers on absolutely everything. So the wealth of information that he has is absolutely worth delving into.
and there's also 4 Buddha and the Black Madonna classes we just finished with a friend of mine, Krista Stanley, who was also at the conference last fall. We did a 4-part series on Buddha and the Black Madonna, and that got posted. So at this point, there are 33 hours of classes plus PowerPoints. So what I'm doing now is turning a lot of the stuff into PowerPoint, like I do at Broughton, that you've seen, and then those will all be in there. So,
well, Kaelan, I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing this with me. I know we've just barely even touched the surface, so I'm sure I'll be asking you to come back
pick a
again.
different topic next time.
Absolutely. And, if people do want to meet Kaelan, then I'm presuming you're going to be back at the Science and Consciousness event again this year.
Yep, and Shard in July, and then people can contact me. I do one-on-ones with people all the time, all over the world, on Zoom, just like this. People that they'll get on the library and get interested in a specific topic and want to go a little deeper. So,
and you do take people on trips.
With the university so far, we haven't. Last one that I organized, that Laura and I organized, was to Portugal a while back.
I didn't mean those sort of trips.
Oh, those trips. Yeah, if you end up in Maine, you can go to the sacred room and ride the table. I have a massage table set up with the 700 ritual objects, and it's like a sound chamber, and you drop people into a zero state consciousness, and they can just play with all the objects.
What does that mean?
Or time travel. Different objects get called into the bowl. There's 700 things in there, and they all have their own histories. So when somebody ends up on the table and the dowsing rod is spinning, and then once all of the sounds are on a person, they level out to where the dowsing rod is flat, which means it's sort of like a state of suspended animation. And then they can time travel or start drawing on the memory bank of all of the ritual objects in the room for a period of time. And then after about a half hour, you drum them out.
Okay. So before you go, can you give us a very rough idea of where people have gone and what they've experienced?
One lady had terminal cancer. She wanted to go forward to see the light. Her friends were in the room and they were trying to hold her back. So she sat up and said, "I went 4 billion years back in time until I was a speck of dust and had my first moment of consciousness."
Wow.
So, which, led me to think about all kinds of other stuff. Another woman returned, and she said, "I returned to the kitchen table and I had the conversation with my husband that I would have had if I had known he was going to get broadsided and killed 5 minutes later."
Wow.
On the way to work.
Wow.
Because, there's these conversations people have, how's your day going? What do you have to do? All that. And so different people have done different things. There was a woman that ended up in the tomb with Jesus, and there was a woman that actually, she was a Catholic, and we were in a church, and she was beneath like this massive mural of Jesus, the life of Jesus. And when she came out of it, she just said, nothing really happened to me, but I remembered at some point I was walking and it seemed like I had a cross over my shoulder, and I walked up on this hill and I remember getting nailed to it.
Wow.
and people were just looking at her like, okay, apparently you experienced the crucifixion.
Wow.
So it's just, I never know when someone
No.
hops off the table where it is they're going to
I suppose you've got to be very clear with the intentions of what it is that you want to
go.
experience.
I almost think it's better to not be thinking where it is you want to go and what you want to do.
Mm.
And wherever you're supposed to go, you'll go, and whatever you're supposed to pick up, you'll pick up. That's always
Wow.
been the theory in all these things. When you walk a labyrinth, I prefer to go in clean
Mm.
and just figure out what the labyrinth is picking up for me.
Mm. Beautiful. Kaylin, thank you so much. An absolute gift
Welcome.
to share this time with you. I've absolutely loved it. And I hope you too have viewers and listeners. So come back next week. We will be exploring more of the weird and having fun of beautiful people
So
along
who's your next victim?
Oh, that's a surprise.
Okay. I have to wait and see then.
You'll have to wait and see for that one. All right, Kaylin, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.